In this video, I'm going to show you how I transformed this aquarium into a beautiful riverbed-inspired community tank for a huge group of amazing fish. I'll show you the process from start to finish and how the aquarium evolves over the first 40 days. I'm Lucas, and welcome to the Terracotta Aquarium channel. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you want to see more beautiful aquariums, make sure that you're subscribed. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. The tank I'm using is a 78-gallon aquarium from Landon. It's a little bit dirty at the moment because I've been using it as a holding tank for all my fish and plants. First thing in the morning, I emptied it out and moved all the fish into other aquariums. The fish that I plan to add will spend a few hours in a bucket while I set up their new home. For filtration, I'll be using an Oase Biomaster 350 Thermo that is upgraded with some stainless steel pipes from F-Zone. I'm using two 30-watt lights from Lamini that clip easily onto the back of the tank. I'll be starting them on an 8-hour photo period, but I may adjust this later. I left a bit of water in the tank at the start. I figured it would be fine as this water is aged and already contains beneficial bacteria. I started the substrate by adding a mix of leftover sand, gravel, and aqua soil that I saved from previous projects. This stuff was aged in other aquariums and would add nutrients and good bacteria to the tank. It came along with some dirty water, so I siphoned some of this out. I added some gravel and a bit of crushed coral to the older substrate and then mixed it all together. I started banking everything towards the back of the tank to create some height and a sense of depth. On top of this, I added a ton of aqua soil. I continued banking it towards the back of the tank and did my best to keep a few inches at the front of the tank clear so that I could create a clean look when I added sand later. I added some root tabs all over the aqua soil to aid in the long-term growth of the plants. I placed these everywhere, but mostly towards the back of the tank, where I imagined that the bulk of the plants would be. Next, I added sand. I added a whole 50-pound bag, but it wasn't quite enough. So I ended up adding more into the back of the tank. I had to use a different color, because that was all that I had on hand. I mixed the two colors together a bit to make it more uniform. After adding the hardscape and scatter gravel, the difference in sand colors won't be as noticeable. I went for about 1.5 inch thick layer of sand over the aqua soil. With the substrate complete, I started working on the hardscape. I had a pretty good selection for this project. I bought a couple of big manzanita branches from a local shop that looked awesome, so I decided to build around them. I also had some pieces of cottonwood that I foraged locally and I treated over the last couple months. I soaked them for a few weeks to remove tannins and then left them in the sun for another couple of weeks to cure. I also had a great mix of stones. I had a huge selection of river pebbles that I bought online and foraged locally, and some huge boulders that my father-in-law let me collect from his driveway. I made sure to power wash these to remove any unwanted residue. To start the scape, I began with the wood and the largest stones, and worked my way down into the smaller sizes. I was trying to create a riverbed-style look that followed the natural flow of the aquarium, keeping in mind where the current would travel. I like the idea of eddies being created behind the larger boulders, creating natural spaces where the fish can go to rest and out of sight of the other inhabitants. I wanted to make the aquarium look as beautiful and natural as possible while keeping the behavior of the fish and overall functionality of the aquarium in mind. This hardscape came together pretty quickly. When you have big, imposing pieces of wood and rock, they nearly escape themselves. Once I was happy with the hardscape, I started tying everything together with scatter gravel. I started with a finer gravel that echoed the tones of the two types of sand that I used. This helped to blend the two colors together. Then I moved up to a larger scatter gravel that contained multiple shapes and colors of stones that really blended the substrate up to the larger rocks in the hardscape. At this point, I was really happy with how the scape was looking. So I started locking the structure together with super glue and cotton pads. I took my time with this to make sure that everything was really solid. Next, I moved on to moss. My vision was to have a ton of moss all over the hardscape that would grow in over time. I used Christmas moss to achieve this. I attached it to the wood with the same liquid superglue that I used on the hardscape. I don't recommend this. It's pretty hard to control, and it can create streaks all over your hardscape. I only used it because I ran out of gel form superglue. It would be better to use gel form or to take your time and tie the moss onto the hardscape. Adding the moss was really exciting. It felt like the aquarium was starting to come to life. With the moss done, I started planting epiphytes. I had a couple of huge pieces of Anubias barteri, the larger of which I wanted to be a centerpiece, so I made sure to keep it on show. I echoed it on the other side of the tank with a smaller piece. I kept adding epiphyte plants, which were a mix of Anubias nana-petite and two slightly different varieties of Bucephalandra, black pearl and purple blue. I've never kept Boost before, but it is a beautiful little plant, and I hope that it thrives in here. Next, I started adding grasses into the foreground. I had a few pots of Sagittaria subulata, which is a smaller variety of Sagittaria, that will hopefully start to carpet the foreground nicely. I merged this with dwarf sag in the midground and into the background. I intended to create a gradient of grasses that would lead into the background, adding to the overall sense of depth in the aquarium. For the background plants, I used two different types, Vallisneria and Hygrophila angustifolia. The Hygrophila grows exceptionally well in harder water, which is what I have locally. I kept the Hygrophila in my holding tank for nearly a month, and it suffered a little bit, so it's going to take some time for it to bounce back and really fill out the background of the tank. The planting was done, so I started filling up the tank. Once it was full, I felt really excited about the scape. It looked incredible. It's hard to convey on camera the scale of tanks that are this size, but it feels huge in person. This is the first tank that I've done on this scale, and I'm really happy with it. When the tank was full, I adjusted the background planes a little bit and reattached any epiphytes that started floating. Then I got the filter started. Over the next couple hours, I let the tank get to the right temperature, and then turned off the lights and started acclimating the fish. They had been in a bucket all day, and I'm sure they were excited to start exploring their new home. After adding them, I dosed the tank with Seachem Stability, a bottled beneficial bacteria. The filter was already cycled, but I did this just to be safe. I decided to let the fish settle in overnight and to check on them the next morning. The next day, I woke up early to check out the tank. I tested the water and I found a trace amount of ammonia, so I immediately did a water change. The ammonia was likely coming from the leftover substrate that I used. The fish seemed fine, but I would end up watching them like a hawk for the next few days. The water was also pretty cloudy, which wasn't unexpected. The manzanita wood has never been in an aquarium before and was releasing a ton of tannins. I decided to run out to a local shop to buy some Purigen. Purigen is a resin that binds with tannins in the aquarium and greatly helps to reduce them. It also helps remove excess ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate, so it was perfect for the situation that I found myself in. Purigen comes in a little bag, and after soaking it for a few minutes, I placed it in with my filter media. The next day, the tank was already looking much clearer, and the Purigen was certainly helping. The ammonia was going down, and I did another water change to help this process along. I figured I would keep up with daily water changes until the parameters were perfect. A few of the fish seemed a little bit stressed by their new environment and all the tinkering that I had been doing over the last few days, particularly the Corydoras, so I decided to keep a close eye on them while stabilizing the parameters. I would have loved to let this tank settle in for at least a week, but I didn't want to keep the fish in a bucket for too long. For the most part, though, the fish have settled in well. I added a group of 17 leopard Danios, 11 Corydoras, 5 of them Cerbi and 6 peppered, and a blue-eyed lemon Pleco named Chester. I also added in 3 tiny honey gourami fry, who are just big enough to not be eaten by the Danios. I figured this is a perfect place for them to grow up. I bred 12 of the Danios completely accidentally, and it's exciting for me to have an aquarium with so many fish that were bred under my care. At this point, I was really happy with the aquarium. The cloudiness was clearing up, and the parameters were starting to stabilize. Let's let the fish settle and the plants grow in. We can check back in a few weeks. It's been exactly 40 days since I set up this aquarium, and it has been totally thriving. The water has completely cleared up, and the plants have really started to grow in. I added about 9 more Danios, a mix of leopard Danios and zebra Danios, to the group of 17 that I started with. I tried to get only females, as I noticed some aggression from the males. So far, the added females have really helped to spread out any mating-related aggression. I also introduced 6 rainbow fish as the centerpiece of the community. I got 2 Bosemani, 2 turquoise, a yellow Madagascar, and a red stripe. I can't remember the exact name of the red stripe rainbow, so let me know in the comments if you know the proper name for this one. The colors of the rainbow fish really add a lot to this aquarium. They're juveniles, and as they get older, their colors will show more and more. The Corydoras are always out and about, foraging for food all over the aquarium, and the few that had a rough transition to the new tank have totally bounced back. Chester, our Pleco, has been growing rapidly since being introduced to this new tank, and I think she is loving the wood and all of the extra space that she gets. The 3 honey gourami fry have tripled in size, and I frequently find them picking at the moss, finding leftover food that gets trapped there. They were too small to easily get on camera before, but now they're really coming into their own. Overall, the community of fish is thriving, and I find myself frequently sitting in front of the aquarium and watching their behavior. The plants are also doing well. All of the epiphytes are slowly growing new leaves, and the grasses in the foreground are just beginning to spread. The background plants have about doubled in size, and it's just about time to start trimming and replanting the Hygrophila angustifolia. I really like how the longest Vallisneria spills forward into the tank and gets pushed across the surface by the flow. The fastest growing plant by far is the Hydrocotyle tripartita. I added this as an afterthought after the first round of planting. It took a couple weeks to take hold, but now that it has, it's snaking its way all over the aquarium. I plan to take some trimmings from it soon to use in other tanks, and to place in other parts of this aquarium. The Christmas moss is taking its time to grow in. I'm just starting to see new growth, and a good portion of it hasn't quite taken hold on the wood. I have my fingers crossed that it will start growing more quickly soon. I've seen a bit of hair algae here and there, but for the most part, the aquarium has been algae-free, which is fantastic. The floating plants and moss do a great job of sucking up all the excess nutrients, as do the fast-growing grasses throughout the aquarium. The only problem that I have with this tank is the substrate. A lot of the aqua soil has started poking through in places. I think I either needed less aqua soil or a thicker layer of sand. Especially in the background, a ton of aqua soil has made its way to the surface. The Corydoras also like to turn over the sand and use it to forage, so they're constantly digging up pieces of aqua soil. If I were to do this build again, I would put the soil into mesh bags underneath the sand, which would completely solve this problem. In the scope of things, this is a small problem, and overall, I'm really happy with how this aquarium turned out. I love having people over to my studio to show it off. There is always something interesting going on in this tank, and it's an absolute pleasure to have in my home. I feel like I can sit in front of it for hours, just observing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you want to see what I'm working on next, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. If you want to see me set up another aquarium, check out this video where I set up a nature aquarium for honey gouramis and cardinal tetra. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.